pickup is really cool, expensive toy. There's a Land Cruiser that you can get into. Place is fun.
Really excited. It's my dream come true. I'm also doing Jacob sitting on the camel in front of
Howard, we're ready whenever you are.
You know the joke about the camel ride?
Okay, guys, we're gonna get started.
Bad idea.
Hi everybody, Awad Iskander. I'm gonna go through a presentation. We used to do that presentation for the Coptic Day. I really like for your guys to do that presentation to the visitors who come to visit us in our church on a Coptic Day. It's very easy and it explains a little bit about our church, our tradition in the church, our Coptic iconography, why the church is built with a dome. All those questions will get answered in that presentation. Feel free to stop me anytime if you have any questions. First, we're going to talk about Coptic architecture. Everything we have really in our church is biblical. So it comes from the Bible. Thank you. Okay, I'll give a little bit background about my career. I'm an architect. I graduated from Egypt and I immigrated to the United States, and I have a passion for Coptic architecture. So I started with our own. I was volunteered to design our little chapel in Colleyville here. And then one of the priests came over to do the service. We didn't have a priest at the time. So he said, oh, we're a small group too. We were like 25 families at the time. We're a small group too. Why don't you come and design our church? So I went to St. Louis, Missouri, and I designed their church. And then Florida called me and said, why don't you come and design our church in Florida? So, with the grace of God, you know, I designed about 27 Coptic churches from the ground up all over the U.S., from California to Chicago to New Jersey to Arizona, to whatever. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity God has given me. Every design is unique, but I try to reflect our Coptic heritage. Very important to share with our American friends our heritage. So I try to stick to the basis of the Coptic church, and we use modern material to emulate the old-fashioned way they used to build buildings with, and I'll share some of that with you. So I really cannot get credit for all these projects. It's the grace of God. And God gave me a gift, so I'm serving His holy name with that gift. So it is not something I brag about, but it's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm thankful for it.
Awad is one of the original founders of our church, and he's very humble. He doesn't like to talk about these things, but I asked him to because I think it's also important to know who are the originals from this church. We had Ramesh Galata here a few weeks ago, and certainly Awad, and I have a tremendous respect for Awad. I've known him for 25,
Thank you
26,
so much.
27 years. It's a great tribute and a great person, historian of our church, and we're very fortunate to have him.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you. So the church plan is always a crucifix shape. There is a lot of symbology in our church. Nothing is designed by chance. Everything is pre-planned with God in mind, Christ in mind. So the floor plan, like you see here, is a crucifix shape, and you can sometimes see that shape at the altar, and sometimes, like our church, you would see the shape here, the cross, the leg of the cross here, and the dome in the center. So there is two designs, but normally it's a Byzantine style. So the building is facing east, means the altar is always facing east. And when we buy a piece of land, we have to make sure the building is gonna fit, because if it's a narrow east-west, then we cannot fit the building in it. The building will be north-south, so we cannot do that. So some pieces of land may not work for our church building. So the entrance is always on the west, and the building is facing east. There are three parts to the church. The Holy of Holies, which is the altar, and only the clergy are allowed there. There is the deacons, the choir, and then the nave. In the old churches, they had also divided up the nave into the narthex. The narthex was people are joining the faith, so they come and kneel to pray, and the church will pray for them to accept faith, and they go through a period of time preparing them, explaining them about the church, about the spirituality of the Coptic church, until they feel they are ready to accept the faith, and then they get baptized, and they become Christians. So this is another example. Sometimes we do the design with the rounded shapes instead of sharp corners. The baptistry is located to the left of the entrance, and that's a symbology of it's outside the church. So it is a condition to go through the baptistry and die with Christ and be reborn with Christ again before you can enter and have partake of the communion. So the baptistry is very important. On the left, because people who get baptized, they move from left to right. The left is non-Christian or evil, the right is Christian. So the baptistry is very important in our church, and it's a condition to becoming a Christian. The dome in the Coptic church, this is another design with the crucifix shape, and then the dome is in the center of the church. The dome represents the presence of Christ with the congregation. So Christ is there, the mural on top of the dome representing Christ, and the people are praying to the Lord. He is the Lord of these people. He is God, the creator of heaven and earth, being present with the people, with his own people. We are his. So there is a wonderful relationship, and the Coptic church would always put Christ the Lord inside the dome, reminding people of his presence with the congregation. We usually have the vaulted ceiling inside the church, as you can see here. And that's because in Egypt there is no forests, there is no wood, there is no timber to use to build buildings with, like they do in the old Native Americans here. So the smart Egyptian builder, he used his local material, mud from the ground, mix it with water from the Nile, mix it with hay, and the hay is just in the field, so it gives a strength. It reinforces the adobe brick. And he made the blocks, put that mud in it, let it sun dry, and then he used it to build those buildings. Well, how do you go up high like that? So he started with a very thick wall, and he builds like that, and he gets thinner as he gets to the top. But you have a big room like this to roof it,
Hope you got a charger.
Yeah. Is there, can I, which one is this?
Let's take out the airplane, yeah.
Okay. So to roof that big building and a tall church, he would start making an arch. The first layer of arch, this picture is not that good. I took it out of a newspaper. They brought the Egyptian builders from Upper Egypt to New Mexico. They built a whole church over there. So, and all the university down there were sponsoring that effort to see how the ancient Egyptians built their buildings. So it was very interesting expedition. And they showed them how. So they built a brick by brick until they do a dome, and then they do a vault, not a piece of timber or lumber in these buildings. And they last years and years. You can see here monasteries built in the 4th century, still doing good in Egypt, even though earthquakes and wind velocity, very high wind velocity, is still doing very well. And this is a very rudimentary way to build, but it's very smart. He has that piece of iron is stuck in the center of the dome, so he can get, he just pointed and put the next layer, and he keeps going until he closes the top. Layer by layer until he closes the top, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, were they using things like Roman cement?
No, actually they're using mud.
They
The
were
same
using
way.
mud. So the cohesion was, oh wow.
Yeah, and then they case it outside and inside. But this is really green buildings, because when the sun hits the building in the morning, it warms up that big thick layer. But the heat doesn't get to the inside. The heat travels very slowly through the mass. By the time in the evening, it's a desert weather like Arizona, the temperature can drop 30 degrees between day and night. So the warmth reach the interior. So it warms the interior, and then during the day, the cycle goes again. They open at the very top a small window. These small windows at the top, when they open it, the wind does that around the dome, so it creates vacuum. So it pulls air from the lower windows. So you get free air condition, and it's really very smart system, very smart. And only the Egyptian did that, no one else in the world. Here there is some adobe buildings in America, but they have timber roofs. So this is a unique system. They don't have much stone, they did it all with adobe. The light comes in from a small hole in the roof or a small window, and it reflects on the surface of the building, and it lights the whole interior. And then now we're building with concrete. This is an old building, concrete, modern, but using the same method. Now here in the States, we can use modern material to build our churches with, and you still use the vault, still use the dome to relate back to our original architecture, but of course we use modern material. But
That's really beautiful. I mean, you can actually see the cross.
Yeah,
Right.
you can see the cross with the
With the
dome,
dome. I mean,
exactly
that's
in the middle
beautiful.
of it,
Yeah.
and then the two steeples. We try to use symbology. So the 4 domes at the 4 corners represent the 4 disciples,
Gospel.
the 4 gospel writers. The word of God went to all corners of the earth. Let's talk a little bit about iconography. When Egypt became Christian, we adopted a lot of the ancient Egyptian art into our church. So when you look at this mask, you would see the gold leaf, you would see the royal colors. They are very basic pigments, natural pigments, blue, red, white, and black. And these are the colors of our icons. We never use green color because the green represents the evil. So only Judas that can be really painted green color, wearing green. The icon in the Coptic church can tell a whole story. It's not particular. So you can see here in one icon, a whole story is told from the Bible to those, very simple, humble people who didn't know how to read and write back centuries away. So you can see that this is talking about Christ throughout the whole story of nativity. So in our church we have iconostasis. The purpose of the iconostasis is talking about Christ on earth. So everything in the iconostasis belongs to Christ. So we can go through part of that contents. It's separating the church from the Holy of Holies, and it has the royal door in the middle, and normally the priest is the only one and the clergy who can go through that door. Deacons prefer to use the side doors. And in the right side of the door, always in all the Coptic churches, mostly even the Russian, and Christ the Pantocrator is sitting on the right hand side of that door. So you would expect to see that every time you enter a Coptic church. And there is a lot of symbology in that. His seat is blue color, representing heaven, and they usually have stars painted on the seat. And then next to that, immediately next to that, is the icon of John the Baptist. And it's all biblical. So that's related to Christ on earth, his life on earth. And then when we finish that part, we can put different icons and different churches. But Christ, the Pantocrator, and the Epiphany have to be on the right hand side of the royal door. What comes after that can change from church to church. And then we can continue around the church with different sayings or different stories from the Bible. On the left side of the door, Saint Mary carrying Christ on her lap. She normally has to be the queen mother carrying Christ on her lap. If you see in the icon, there is 3 stars, one on her head, one on her shoulder, and one on her other hand. These stars represents that she was virgin before getting pregnant. She was virgin during pregnancy, and she was forever virgin. And then underneath her feet, we a lot of times show the pigeons and things from Apsalmodeia. From it's all related to the praises that we sing to her, and we glorify her name with that. She is sitting on the throne, so that means she is the mother of God, and the seat is blue color with stars in it because she was the second heaven, worthy to carry Christ the Lord inside of her. So that's always on the left side of the door. Now we can continue. The Annunciation is immediately to the left of that, and those are given in every church. We have to have that rhythm, that order. And then you can see Archangel Michael after that, and I would say 99% of our churches in this order. Some people may deviate. And then comes St. Mark, the Apostle, and the founder of our church. In his icon, you can see Alexandria lighthouse. You can see underneath the land of Egypt flourished. with the word of God. You can see a tree with 7 fruits. So a lot of symbology in the Coptic icon. Above the altar, above the royal door, is the Last Supper. And in our church, we always use 1 bread and 1 cup. We don't use multiple. Some churches, I caught few actually painted in Egypt way back then, maybe 100 years or something, and they have multiple cups and multiple bread. That is not a true Orthodox icon. So, but it was really 1800 something, so knowledge was not that. The reason we have 1 is this is the communion, so it has to be 1, not multiple pieces of bread. God broke only 1 piece of bread and he gave to his disciples. I might go back. I don't know if some icons are drawn with Judas in it. Some icons have Judas. Okay, you can see Judas on the left side here, and he's painted in green color. He did not participate with the Lord because he betrayed him. Some people say, no, he participated, but he was not worthy. Like somebody not repentant and did not go to confession and go partake of the communion. So, well, that debate, we will settle it one day when we go to heaven and know the facts. Yeah.
It says in the Bible that he was not there during that time. So.
Probably so.
Yeah.
It's controversial because sometimes you read and he says one of you is going to betray me, right?
And it says who he who dips his
Exactly.
His
bread,
so right.
and then a wine.
You have a good point, but they are saying that there was a supper and then the last, the communion. Is it the same? I don't think it's the same.
Okay.
Lower first can feel first,
Yeah.
وبعدين feel communion.
Okay.
So which one did he eat of it?
Yeah,
He participated with them in the Last Supper, meaning the Passover dinner that all the Jews ate.
Yeah.
He ate with them.
He ate with them.
And he dipped his
He
hand.
dipped his
Yeah.
hand in the dish.
And Christ told him at that time, whatever you're doing it, do it quickly.
Quickly.
Yes.
And that's when he left, and that's when Christ broke and gave to his disciples.
So, okay. So Tante Dina is saying basically this icon is truthful because he's leaving. He was not sitting partaking of the communion.
Right.
So, the iconographer and the scholar have different...
Which icon, the before or the after?
I think what you said makes really good sense because that is true. The literal interpretation, my understanding from reading the Bible, he did not partake of it and he left. So he is painted green and he's leaving. A lot of time he is holding the money. He's holding the bag in his hand. So, the 12 disciples, again, this is confirming that in our church, we always have everything in the iconostasis is about Christ. So we have 6 disciples on the right, 6 disciples on the left, and of course the 6 don't have Judas, the 12 don't have Judas in them, but they have Matthias.
Yes.
The replacement. On the crown of all our faith is Christ on the cross. So we put this in the highest point of the iconostasis, reminding people this is our story. Christ, the Lord, on the cross, who paid the price for us. There, you can see in this icon many, many symbols if you keep looking at it. The land is full of plants, so this is the life. The tree with 7 fruits. The water, this is the living water that God, the Creator, had given us. And then the bird this is an everlasting bird. They call it the everlasting bird in our church. So it symbolizes that whoever drinks from whoever drinks from the living water, well, the living water is Christ. So whoever partakes of the communion and becomes united with Christ is like drinking the everlasting water. So he would live forever. And so, you know, the gold leaf, the royal palette, a lot of things has been taken. The iconography in our church is 2D, it's not 3D, so it's not real. And we like that because ancient Egyptians drew their figures in a profile. The shoulders are like that, but the face always in profile. And they did that because in the return of the soul, they can only recognize the person from the profile, so they made sure to paint their pharaohs in profile on the face, so when the soul comes back, knows this is the person, and get into the body, and then come back to life. In our church, we took that profile and made it in front, but it's a 2D. It is not a 3D. So this is something related to our ancient history with the ancient Egyptians. Her clothes are full of stars, and then she has the star on her head, on her left shoulder, on her left arm. Right shoulder, I'm sorry, and left arm. A lot of symbology in our icons. Anybody has any question regarding the architecture of the church or the iconography?
What are the 7 fruits again for?
I'm sorry, the what?
The 7 fruits or the 7?
The 7 fruits, it's a symbol of, how do you say that? Perfection. Dina, perfection, الكمال, الكمال, اللي هو the perfection. Yeah, number 7 in the Bible always, yeah, the perfection, the completeness, the thing.
And why do we have the cherubim on the crucifix?
I'm sorry?
If you go back one slide, you see
Sure.
the cherubim on the crucifix. Why do we have that on the top right there? So you have the crucifix and you have the cherubim right.
Should have been above the cross.
I don't know the answer to that one, but I can research it and get back to you. They use the Bible literally, so the iconographer, they sit down and study the Bible. When Dr. Isaac Fanous, he went to be with the Lord. When he did our church, I went one day, he was doing the apse. He had the Bible open, and I thought he was having a devotion time or something. He said, no, you can come over, I'm studying. So what are you studying? Revelation. So the apse of the church reflects the revelation, and he has to study it in order for him to sleep on it, and then the next morning he starts from what he he imagined putting the icon together. The 4 incorporeal creatures, and Christ sitting on the throne, and the 4, you know, it's just a beautiful piece. So they study the Bible, so I can assure you, this is right out of the Bible. One of the angels who has the 6 wings,
Yeah.
2 covering his. I mean, it's amazing. Those angels cannot even look at the Lord with their eyes, and we can see the Holy Communion and take it within us, so we become one in Him. I mean, this is something that probably the angels would love to do that if they can, but they can't. They don't have the body.
Alan, are you aware? They have a class actually it's a course. It's iconography
Oh, is that right?
in the cathedral in Besaida
Wow.
in Egypt.
Yeah.
So it's actual course, like
Yeah.
it's a length of study, and they teach how to do the 2Ds and the different color palettes, and it's a really nice course.
That's great.
It's,
That's wonderful.
iconography.
How long does it take? Can one go for a vacation and go
No,
through?
I think it's yeah.
It's for the.
long.
I went to London. I was in London back then. I was studying, so I was studying part time. I had the rest of the day. I helped them design about 65 icons for the church in London, and I learned from him iconography because I was helping. He didn't have any helpers, and I love art, so I helped him. So that's how I picked mosaic and I picked up iconography. So I was really lucky. And then when Ayman came here, I had another small crash course to remind me how to do stuff. On the icons, it's different than any painting with oil or anything. You start with a gold leaf. First, you get a piece of wood. You put fabric, white cotton fabric on it. Put a gesso material on it, and the gesso becomes like a white plastery surface that they sand smooth really well, and then they start drawing on it. First thing they put is the gold leaf. In order to do the gold leaf, it's a 24 karat gold leaf. The only material you can really thin it so bad. And they cannot touch it with the hand, it will break. So they take a brush and get a static from their hair, pick up the gold leaf, it comes like a booklet. Pick up the edge of the gold leaf and very slowly put it down on the glue. And then you keep going until you finish the gold leaf, you let it dry. Next day you spray it to protect it, so when you're working your watch and stuff doesn't scratch it. And then you start working on the images. The image starts with the dark first, so Christ, dark hair goes in first, and then he starts putting lighter layer on top of that until he finished the icon. When you look, when I'm standing here, the shadow comes like that, so under my chin probably there is shadow. In the icon, it's the reverse, because the figure has internal light. Christ is, I apologize, Christ is the light himself. So under his chin, you would see some light coming from nowhere, and his face is around his eyes, and instead of being dark, it's lighted. So they have different rules to play in those icons. Probably one of the iconographers in London, he has a course that he gives in the church in London. Very nice guy. Yeah, he's a young man. He learned iconography. He does really great work, and he does a course for the youth. Like 2 evenings a week and things like that. But it's not concentrated course like the 2-year in Egypt. That's an official course in Egypt. But
George in Houston,
yeah,
he did Saint Avenue Church. The iconographer that did Saint Avenue is actually doing the church in Houston. So if you ever want to see a complete, not complete, but as possible,
project,
to be complete,
a whole project.
You can go to St. Mary and the icons there, like you're saying, it's a complete reflection of the Bible.
Yes.
Every story there is a complete reflection. So if you can't go to London to see the one that Awad is talking about, you can drive to Houston and spend. He loves to teach people. So my daughter went and actually painted with him.
Oh, that's
He
great.
loves to. If you're into that, he will get you
Yeah.
to incorporate it.
Actually, if you start talking to George, he keeps talking with a passion about his work, about the iconography. And when they are doing this icon, he talks to the saint, the patron of the icon. I mean, some people may think the guy is going, because you enter the room and he is talking to him. So it's really a beautiful relationship when he spends his time working with iconography and all those beautiful saintly figures. It's an awesome, and it shows at the end when you enter a church. Some churches way back then in Egypt from the 4th century, the iconography is not that old. The iconography probably 200, 300 years old, but you feel the presence of God. You look at the icon and the hair on the back of my neck. I mean, it's amazing how these people reflected the image of God on the icon. Definitely the Holy Spirit is part of that process, definitely. I can tell you that. It's amazing. Any other questions? I hope y'all can take that little slide or show and keep it and use it and study it. Add on to it, research on your own, other things in the Coptic church, and add on to it and use it. We would love for your guys and girls to get up and speak about your church when we have an open day, or to our guests and our neighbors, and we like to share with them our heritage and our spirituality in the Coptic church. Thank you so much for the invite. I appreciate that. Sure.
There was a question about Coptic art versus some of the churches in our in Orthodoxy have adopted Italian.
Yes.
What determines for the church which form of art they take, and what are the major differences?
I think that our Coptic icons have, kind of related to the ancient Egyptians I mentioned before, and therefore it's a 2D image. Now, some people who came from a background of churches, Chopra, for instance, has a beautiful church and it has Italian paintings, so they did it 3D like any regular painting. They did real figures, not 2D figures like that. So they lived all their life in that church, and they are related, they kind of, so when they come to America and they want to build a new church, no, I don't like the 2D. No, we want a real figure. We want a real Saint Mary. We want a real Lord. And they feel very strongly about it, and they make sure that their church is painted that way. It's a beautiful way of doing pictures as well, but it's a different school. Some people, one of the fathers, he said, look, I hired a guy in Egypt, he would open the book and do exactly like the classic picture of Saint Mary.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't create an icon, Abuna. He copied the book. So for him, and it looks like any, you remember Sunday school back home, they used to give us pictures of Saint Mary in Sunday school. He did exactly like that. It's a beautiful picture. It's nice, but it's not traditional Coptic. We have a tradition. We have a way to draw our icons. There is no gold in it. The background doesn't have any gold leaf. So some iconographers try to mix between the two. Use a gold leaf, but do a 3D. And they're nice too. So, but I think our 2D icons is very known. And if you go to okay, let me tell you this. If you go to the Greek Orthodox Church,
Yes.
they have.
I was about to say that because because the Greek, they have they have the stories, but they have it in a very imaginative way. It's not like from the book. It's actually like all the pictures. When I asked about all the pictures, they relate to each other, but they're not actual like they will put a sheep on there, and I'm like, what does that sheep represent? They're like, oh, well, it has a story to it, but it doesn't really represent the actual.
It's not traditional.
Yes, it's not the actual story from the book. So
The Greek, for instance, are religious. The word religious, I mean, they are so close to their art, which is 2D, by the way. So you can never go to a Greek church in the States or in Greece and see an Italian art. When you go to Italy, you'll never go to an Italian church and see a Greek art. So everybody has their tradition, they want to stick to it. In our community, I would say that's not a high priority.
Yeah.
So they build beautiful churches and we enjoy the iconography no matter what, but sometimes they're pictures, they're not icons, but they're still holy pictures. So they get maroon, and when we touch them, we take the blessing of the saint, we take the maroon, so it's still wonderful to have. But it's not really, let's say,
It comes back to the congregation. I mean, we actually voted. here at St. Mary,
Yeah.
we had a voting day, what kind of art we wanted to have, whether we wanted to have Italian or Coptic, and everybody
Yeah.
voted, and,
Yeah.
and it was overwhelming Coptic,
Yeah.
whereas in St. Philip Petir, they
Yeah.
wanted Italian.
Yeah.
Mm.
It depends on how the people were brought up.
Yeah.
If you were coming from an Italian painted church, you would feel so attached to it because that's all the person during growing up, and all the image in the head is coming like that, so they kind of feel like it shouldn't be 2D. No. We don't understand the 2D. Well, you need to learn about Coptic iconography. I mean, it's a beautiful art. It's a true Egyptian. I mean, yeah.
So I have a question about Samir's icon. She's usually wearing
Go ahead.
okay. She's
Go ahead.
wearing blue 80% of the time because she's the second heaven, but sometimes she's like painted brown. Is there a reason for this?
I asked that question to Ayman. If you notice when you come into our church, the big church, he has it painted in brown.
Yeah.
He gave me a really, really good answer right from the Bible,
Okay.
and I totally forgot about it.
Email him.
So I'm gonna find out the answer and I will tell you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll send you a message with
Good
that
question.
because he gave me really a good answer.
Because I think I remember asking the same question. I think they're trying to go back to her native origin. Saint Mary was Jew.
Yeah.
Jews are not white.
Yeah,
So she's actually not black, she's more olive color.
yeah,
And that's what they were trying to reflect,
Yeah,
her
yeah.
But they all are.
Yes.
They all should be olive skin. We're olive skin. Don't look far away from us. You're not?
No, I am. I'm saying people in the south.
And the royal door.
Yeah, in Upper
The
Egypt.
ones
You
that
ought
are-
to see that picture, by the way.
Yeah.
This is
Not
very
many- nobody
interesting.
here.
Right.
They're darker, much darker.
You can have an icon there, but it's not, it's an icon.
Well, yeah, you're not listening.
How many figures do you know? That's why I'm saying, the ancient Egyptian, he's showing me a figure, I don't know if this is a figure, it looks like a church. This is an underground tomb, ancient. It looks like a royal door. And guess what? These picture of disciples, they are 11. They are 5 and 6. Isn't this amazing? And look at the top, almost like the Last Supper.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the ancient Egyptians almost knew God, but not quite. But, you know, I mean, look at the apples with the round things.
I don't think this is like a game of horseshoe.
You know what's really amazing is the test of time, especially like some of the churches that I visited that had, or monasteries that had carbon damage to the carbon, where the icons were damaged, whether it's fire, and you were able to bring it back. How did it retain the original colors through 2,000 years?
The natural pigments, they don't change color because they are grounded material from the stone, so they don't change colors over time. They may get dirty on the surface, so the archaeologists and the scholars have found ways to clean them and bring back the natural color, which is so our icons, they have beautiful colors, and it goes on for years and years, and it's very clear layer to protect them from touching. You know, people like to take blessing and they touch them, and the oil in the hand gets on them, but they last.
So are they using the same kind of pigments today that they
Very much
did
so.
2,000 years ago?
Thank you for that question. They use these natural pigments. It's a pure natural pigment, and they mix it up with the egg yolk, because that's the material that makes it fixes the material, so they can use it to paint. They don't use water. And it's amazing how it lasts all those years without changing color, without fading. And they build it up layer on top of layer, so working on icons takes long time. And when they build it up, it has a thickness. Abuna, for instance, he comes out and the deacons on the left, so he sprays the deacons, and of course that water gets on the icons, but the icons doesn't get oxidized or
Right.
from
So
the
if it was
water.
water-based,
Yeah.
that, it would actually be, it would wipe
Yes.
away. So
Yes.
because it's not water-based, it's egg-based,
Yeah.
it would, it's not gonna damage it. And it's not gonna stain it.
Yeah, and also the gold leaf 24 karat, that also doesn't get damaged or doesn't oxidize when you have that layer protecting it from the weather. It's amazing how they did it. The ancient Egyptian, when they opened the tomb, you can see that the mask, the pharaoh's mask, it's like it was painted a month ago. And the same way with the icons, painted the same way, protected the same way, and that's coming down from the ancient Egyptian style of painting versus, I can assure you that the oil painting on the Italian side will not do that, will not last that many years. It will need to be restored also.
Really?
It will change color, but the natural pigment will never change color. The oil, when you put red, after 10 years, it is not the same color anymore. But when you use natural pigments, that's will
So
never.
the Italian use an oil base.
Yeah, yeah. So very
So
interesting.
when they're writing the icon or
Yeah.
painting, or is it normal tools like a normal paintbrush or is it special tools?
No, they use regular paintbrush.
I
Yeah.
didn't know because of the.
Yeah, the regular brush. And you said writing. That's a good word. We write the icons. We don't paint icons. Because the writing is coming from the Bible, so we're telling a story. We're not painting. That's a good one. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm curious what you think. Like I've noticed some icons, the features of the face
Yeah.
are somewhat primitive.
Yeah.
The current ones are a little bit more, almost like they're. I think they're more realistic in some ways. I'm curious, is that kind of a stylistic thing by iconographer, or how far away? Like, how would you compare something that was written, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century versus something in the last 100 years? I mean, are they kind of similar in how the features are presented, or does it have we changed based on techniques and availability of material and that kind of thing?
That's a good question. I think each artist puts his own touch and his own creativity and how the Holy Spirit inside of him guides him through. So from different artist to artist, when I enter a church, I can immediately say, this is Tassoni Sousen.
Whatever.
Yeah, this is, Budur. Different people have different way of making the portraying, and colors too. I mean, Ayman al-Andina has bright colors. Dr. Isaac Fanous, who is his master in iconography, he did the chapel, the small chapel. He is much darker in colors. Dr. Isaac Fanous has his original thought, but Ayman has his own school now. He's teaching now in Egypt. He has a brighter colors. Some people like that. Some people like the other. So each one has a different. But one thing you would see always, if you see a big picture of, let's say, Christ going into Jerusalem, you would see Christ in a bigger than all the rest of the people, and that's coming from the ancient Egyptians again. Pharaoh was always bigger than any other thing. So a lot of things transferred, adopted from the ancient Egyptians, including a lot of those features.
I was just gonna say it's very similar to the Bible where you can compare even between the four gospels where they all saw a lot of similarities, but they wrote things in a little bit of a different way. So you can't
That's a
say,
good one.
you know, St. Matthew and St. Luke, two different
Mhm.
approaches of how they're looking at the same
Mhm.
thing,
Yeah.
Mhm.
you know. So
They are
it's just-
inspired
it's-
by the
but it's-
Holy
but
Spirit.
It's still, like you said, it's still led by the Holy Spirit,
Yeah.
so the message is clear.
That's a good example. The message is inspired by the Holy Spirit, but each one had put his own way of explaining and writing.
So
So
like
yeah,
all that Ray talk.
yeah.
Are you the reason why he's here? You mentioned you were in same in his that you helped design his church. Are you the reason why he's here?
What? Oh, I mentioned that you designed you were the architect for the St. Louis church.
It's a blessing. This is the second church I designed. It's so dear to my heart because again they have the same struggle we had. Very small group of people trying to build a church. Everybody wants to have this and that and that, you know. But really the availability of funds and the land is what they want to build a cathedral, so it's always a challenge. But you know, at the end we look at it, it's beautiful.
It is.
And the grand opening day, everybody is so happy and excited. There is some excitement by a new church opening. And everybody forgets all the cathedral and Taj Mahal stuff they wanted to, they couldn't afford.
Any other questions? Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you
That
so
was
much.
fantastic.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Alright, that's great.
Go ahead, Nick.
I'm gonna follow from the Holy Spirit. Hold on, man. Take a moment to just quiet your hearts and raise your hearts to God. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for bringing us here together. Thank you for our speaker and for the riches of wisdom that he brings with him. That for all the blessings that you've given him and his ability to serve your name, to serve your church, and to serve your body. We pray that we take this lesson into our hearts, and so that when we enter a church, we can see the riches of the message that you portray to us through the icons and through the buildings, and that your word is true. That if we are silent, even the stones will cry out in your name. Heavenly Father, we thank you for all the riches of faith that we get through this church and through the body of believers and the community and the fellowship of the believers that we have in our gathering. Pray that you guide us in our lives to bring this message to all the people that are around us, so that they too can enjoy in the riches of your message. Through the intercession of the Holy Theotokos Saint Mary and all the choir of your saints, cloud of witnesses who surround us and guide us, hear us as we pray to you thankfully.
Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses,
Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Christ Jesus our Lord. Amen. Slow down, slow down.